What is the funniest story you have ever read on Reddit? Story 1. Last night, my wife's boss from her brand new job invited us over for dinner. On the drive over, my wife reiterated many times to me just how important it was to make a good impression. I scoffed and arrogantly informed my silly wife that I always make good impressions. My wife's boss is a single lady in her 50s, so it was just the three of us. We chit-chatted over drinks and salads and seemed to really be hitting it off. She laughed at my well-timed, perfectly appropriate jokes and my wife seemed pleased. Soon she brought out the main course, a nice big juicy steak for each of us. As I began to cut into my steak, I was discouraged to discover how undercooked this steak was. Now, I've had my fair share of rare steak. I prefer medium, but I can handle rare. This was several minutes on a hot grill short of rare. I probably could have resuscitated the cow had I tried. Instead, I sat there fidgeting with my knife and fork, worrying about how I was going to get away with not eating this steak. Claim veganism? No, I'd already feigned great enthusiasm upon seeing the steak. Just then, our hostess excused herself to the kitchen to take care of some dessert preparations. As I looked across the fancy dining room table at the open window of this third-story apartment, a cartoon light bulb appeared over my head. I knew I had to be decisive, realizing that she could return at any moment. I committed. I grabbed the steak with my hand, gently shook off the juice and executed a perfect throw right through the center of the open window. Here's the big time FU. The window wasn't open. It was the cleanest fricking window you've ever seen in your life. That is, until my mostly raw slab of steak slammed up against it and slowly slid down, leaving a trail of bloody juice in its wake. My wife, whose steak was a nice medium rare and was unaware of my predicament, turned, jaw dropped, and stared at me like I was an alien from another planet. This look then slowly morphed into more of a "there is no place on this planet you can ever hide from me" expression of demonic anger. My wife's boss heard the thud of the steak on window impact and came quickly. She took in the scene, the steak sitting on the windowsill, the blood trail, my empty plate, and then gave me an inquisitive, puzzled look. I just didn't know what to say. It felt like a minute of silence, but was probably 3 or 4 seconds. Finally, the best I could manage was "I'm so sorry. I am such a klutz. I don't know. I was just cutting it. And it slipped. Just ask my wife, I really am a klutz. Right, honey? No help coming from that direction. I will clean this up. I can't believe this. I am so sorry." Both women continued to stare at me like I had escaped from the loony bin, as I smeared the blood around the window with my cloth napkin, dusted off the steak, and continued to mutter my incoherent explanation. I knew no one was buying the story. I knew what I had to do. I sheepishly returned to my seat and proceeded to eat every bite of that disgusting, cold, chewy, bloody, raw steak. I remained pretty quiet the rest of the evening. My wife's only 2 words to me since the incident are "I'm fine." Story 2. My friend was sleeping over at my house. My parents and brother were all sleeping upstairs while we were downstairs watching TV, playing video games and shit. At around 1 a.m. he asks if this girl can come over. He really wants to get with this girl, and I don't want to turn him down, so I reluctantly agree, on the condition that she's quiet. The 3 of us are hanging out and I make some excuse to leave the room so my friend can have some alone time with this girl. I'm upstairs in my room when I start hearing loud moans. This is bad news for me, but great news for my friend. He's losing his virginity to a girl he really likes. I hear stirring in the next room and I know that their bout of loud lovemaking has woken my parents. The last thing I want is for my confused father to walk in on my friend ducking this girl in my basement. What do? I go to Pornhub, click on the first video I see, crank that shit to 100 on my speakers and let it play for the around 3 minutes that my buddy ended up lasting. My dad ended up coming into my room, discovering the source of the noise. I even threw in some fapping motion under the covers, and awkwardly leaving. My buddy ended up having the best ducking time ever, bro, but Jesus, there were some awkward glances exchanged between my parents and I the next morning. Story 3. This happened a good long while ago now, so not really today. It was April when I started this journey. During the winter I became a member of a magic mushroom forum and was learning all I could about growing magic mushrooms. I tried it once before and grew only a yellowish green mush that smelled of sweaty socks, but this time would be different. I had a spore print sent to me and was off to the races. I had tried mushrooms once before about 10 years prior and the experience was rather enjoyable. I have had way too many bad experiences with LSD to ever think about trying it, and from what I remember the mushroom experience was much less chaotic and harsh for me than the majority of my acid trips had been. After following every tip I could gather in about a month and a half of waiting, I have viable mushrooms drying in the food dehydrator. The whole journey, from spore print to fruit, was done for reasons I don't yet have a great grasp on. I was thinking at the time that growing them would impart some spiritual meaning into my experience. It had been a long, long time since I had taken any illegal substance and I wanted it to be special in some way. Growing them myself was an attempt at providing that, I guess. The night I took them I really wasn't planning on doing so. I was bored out of my wits and chatting with online friends. I told them I was going to eat my mushrooms but didn't know how much to eat without a scale. I took a few pics of my intended dose and posted them and immediately got advice to cut that dose in half. So, with my wife asleep, I went down to the kitchen and made a concoction of purple slushy and powered mushrooms and gulped it down. I came back up and told the chatters that the deal was done and that I was taking shower and would be back once the fun started. In the shower about 5 minutes when I felt a rush like consciousness was being pulled away from my body. I was fighting to keep it with me. It felt as though as I had let it fly away I would have had a full out-of-body experience, but for some reason I felt compelled hold on to it. I quickly turned off the water and looked down at my feet. They seemed miles away. That is when it hit me that the shrooms were kicking in. Out of the shower and I put on the same clothes I came in with and headed upstairs. The shower is in the basement of the house and there is a door at the top of the stairs. Opening the door, the light from the kitchen blasted my eyes and I got a good gauge of how far along in the experience I was. I would see that the kitchen floor looked smooth and had a liquid-like texture. But before I could survey any more my black cat ran down in the basement. I didn't want to forget about him down there and it never really thought that I could just leave the door open and shoo any members of our herd that wandered down there after my trip. I trudged down the stairs after him and scooped him up and started back up the stairs. Halfway up, a brown blur flew down the stairs as another cat dove to the basement. I tossed the black one in the kitchen and went after the brown one. While picking up brown one, the black cat came back down the steps again and I scooped him up too. Now I am carrying 2 cats up the stairs. At the top of the stairs, the door is wide open and I see our other 3 cats had come to investigate the commotion. As I made the final push to the top they all jumped into action like they planned it in advance. I started laughing hysterically, let go of the cats in my arms and sat on the top step as I watched all the cats bounce down the stairs. I found the whole situation so funny. Here I am coming up hard on mushrooms. I can feel the confusion building every second and now I have to figure a way of getting all 5 cats out of the basement. By the time I had collected myself and devised a plan my face was hot and objects were starting to move. The time dilation had manifested and minutes were seeming to take longer and longer. My plan was to go down and capture 1 cat at a time and usher them upstairs. Once I got to 5, the task would be complete. I raced down and grabbed the first cat I came across. And ran to the landing and toss it, pretty forcefully, up the last 3 steps into the kitchen so it would get the point that I didn't want them down there. Back down I went and did the same thing, that's 2 down and 3 to go. I was getting more confused by the minute and on the 4th cat. I had forgot how many cats I had previously ushered up the stairs. Face palm. On my way back down I decided to count the cats downstairs and that would let me know how many were upstairs. Unfortunately, the whole time I had neglected one key detail in my foolproof plan. The door was still open. Just as I reached the basement floor, the whole herd came stampeding down again. Plan A was an utter failure. Formulated just as quickly as Plan A, was Plan B. Cats have got names, right? I will count the cats as I bring them up and remember the name of each cat so that I don't lose track like the last time. Brilliant. I thumped back down the stairs and grab Funchi, the black one, and take him upstairs. He quickly tries to run back down and I push him back and close the door. Back downstairs I grab another cat. Sammy, number 2, I think, as I put her upstairs and close the door behind me. At this point my mind is worn out. Things are moving very well and walls have waves in them and on them. It is all but impossible to keep my mind on the task at hand. Those 2 things, coupled with the fact that the time dilation is making the last 5 minutes chasing these beasts feel like I have been at it for hours, is making this fool's errand about as much as my brain could handle in its current state. I trudge on trying to complete this task and grab another cat, but again at the top of the stairs I forgot where I was in the order. I put that cat upstairs and tried to count the cats up there to give me an idea of how many were left. But of course, they are not in the kitchen anymore. And again it escapes me that if I just keep bring up cats until I run out of cats to retrieve I will be through with this cluster duck. Unable to think past my current predicament, I race around upstairs looking for the cats that had been brought up and they are nowhere to be found. My state had grown worse and I start thinking that maybe they got outside, but there was no way they could get out because no one opened the door. The door. I forgot to close the basement door. Duck 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 duck. Ran back into the kitchen and down the stairs for the 50 quadrillionth time and bam. There they were, all 5 of them. Safe and sound. I had found the missing cats. Hallelujah. They weren't outside, my wife would have killed me if they were gone. Me, all high and shit and the cats go missing? I might as well pack my shit and go. What a relief. I love my kitties. Kiss kiss kiss. Wait. Are we still in the basement? Ducking cock-sucking son of a bitch mother damn shit hell. I am done. My mental ability is gone. Each trip up and down felt like an eternity. I had only just enough energy left to get upstairs to the couch. I kneel by the couch and think about what I'm going to do. I am mentally exhausted because apparently, counting to 5 is impossible while on mushrooms. My mind racing to come up with a solution to this impossible problem, and never once did I think of just leaving them down there until they found something more entertaining to do than drive me out of my ducking mind. The white flag was up. It was over. I needed the big gun. It was 2 or 3 a.m., and she had to get up and go to work in the morning, but I had no choice. I needed an adult. I have to wake my wife. She would make it all better. She will tame those damn hellions and all will be fine, but it wasn't fine. I went upstairs to our room and woke her in the gentlest way possible. By jumping on the bed and yelling help. I took mushrooms. 5 cats in the basement and I can only count to 4. Not the way I had envisioned it going down in my head, but I was happy to get that much out without forgetting the reason I woke her up in the first place. Sleepily she marched down the stairs and I lead her to the kitchen where the basement door was still wide open. All I could do was stand at the door and point down the stairs. I think I may have whimpered a little too with my gesture. She was not amused. I thought I was finally going to get closure. She would get the cats from the basement and I would be saved, but no. My savior turned to torment her as she said the only words in the word that could crush me into an even more pitiful state. Well, go get him, she said. She didn't understand that I was fighting this fight for what seemed like days now and wanted nothing more than to curl up in the corner and cry until I fell asleep. She had no clue how close I was to a breakdown. Tears welled up as crossed the threshold of the basement door and descended again into my personal hell. I scooped up a kitty and carried it slowly upstairs, setting it on the kitchen floor. 1, my wife said in a long drawn-out voice like she was talking to a 2-year-old. Back down I went and grabbed up another bundle of joy and slinked up the stairs only to be shamed again by a long drawn-out 2. By the 3rd cat, short audible poo sounds were coming from me as I was almost to the breaking point. My wife had begun to laugh at me and seemed to laugh harder each time I came up, even more beaten than before. When the last cat came up I was greeted by a sighing 5 and a now was that so hard for my wife. I tried to apologize but she waved me off with a stern "we'll talk about this in the morning" and walked upstairs to bed. The cat ordeal was over but the trip was far from it. I was immensely grateful to my online buddies who talked me into halving the dose because the rest of the night was filled with confusion and mind duckery and intense time dilation. Not really a bad trip as bad trips go, but not at all enjoyable. I think I can cross mushies off the list of viable boredom relievers. I won't be doing them again anytime soon, that is for sure. Story 4. When I was young my father said to me, "Knowledge is power." Francis Bacon. I understood it as knowledge is power, Francis Bacon. For more than a decade I wondered over the meaning of the second part and what was the surreal linkage between the two. If I said the quote to someone, "Knowledge is power, Francis Bacon," they nodded knowingly. Or someone might say, "Knowledge is power," and I'd finish the quote Francis Bacon and they wouldn't look at me like I'd said something very odd but thoughtfully agree. I did ask a teacher what did knowledge is power, Francis Bacon mean and got a full 10-minute explanation of the knowledge is power bit but nothing on Francis Bacon. When I prompted further explanation by saying Francis Bacon in a questioning tone I just got a yes. At 12 I didn't have the confidence to press it further. I just accepted it as something I'd never understand. It wasn't until years later I saw it written down that the penny dropped. Story 5. When I was in 6th grade, my small town school track team did very well and was allowed to compete in the state finals. My event was the 200-meter dash, and while I did okay against the other small towns we normally faced, I had no chance at state. This was pretty much the case for most of us, so we mostly goofed off and explored the massive arena and whatever. I wasn't allowed soda at home, but somebody bought me a huge Coke and I thought it was pretty great. Came time for me to run my race, well actually my heat in the preliminaries, as this thing was so big time that they actually had more runners than would fit on the track at once, first time I'd ever seen that. Coach tells me to do my best and have fun. Nobody expects much, it's just an honor to be there. I line up on this beautiful, wide cinder track with maybe 15 lanes, I was used to 8, and an unbelievable crowd watching. Big grandstands full of people, all new to me. I get kind of excited about the whole thing. So we all set our feet in the blocks, crouch down and tense up, waiting for the shot from the starter pistol. Meanwhile a hush settles over the crowd, we're on edge waiting for the bang. When the starter fires, I take this huge leap forward like I'm going to sprint the whole 200 meters, which is pretty much what people who are good at it do, but not my usual approach. This massive physical effort simultaneously propels the most violent, loudest fart of my life out my preteen stinkhole. Most of the crowd hasn't trained to the peak physical level that I have, so their reaction to the pistol shot is a tiny bit slower. The effect is that after the bang but before anyone makes a single sound, my fart echoes through the arena with unbelievable clarity and tone. For everyone there it's just like bang. Fart. I manage a few strides just out of instinct before realization of what's happening starts to set in. I glance over at the crowd and in that split second I can just see it on every face. They know. They all know and they are all looking right at me. This starts me laughing super hard while also running as hard as I ever have, and what's my Bodice reaction to that unusual combination? Yep, fart a lot more. However, I am now taking strides pretty rapidly, so instead of one big blast, I'm ripping a little one with each step. I can't even think of what letters could represent the sound. If you can imagine a rapid series of very brief, very loud farts, that's pretty much it. This whole situation has only taken like 10 seconds to develop, we aren't even halfway done yet and I've farted about 15 times. I literally could not continue from laughing so damn hard. I stumbled to a hunched over stop right there in the middle of the fanciest arena I've ever been to, giggling like the farting idiot I am. I then realized that nobody is rushing past me, which come to think of it should have happened by this time in the race regardless of the fart situation. I turn around and every one of the other runners is either lying on the ground or crouched over laughing just as hard as I am. Literally crying laughing. Apparently, my fart-propelled lunge off the line had taken most of them out and the rest succumbed to my staccato encore presentation. And that's the story of how an entire heat was eliminated from the 200-meter state finals with no one completing the event, which I was told had never happened before in the history of state finals. I escaped amazingly unscathed as the tiny handful of people from my school were all setting up for their own events and not watching. There were rumors of a second farter and basically they let me walk away. I hid in the school bus till we left, and my coach was the only person to ever speak to me about it. He didn't laugh but he also didn't yell at me.